Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Tadaima 2021, the special presentation of Resistance at Amache and the Road to Recognition. My name is Kenji Taguma. I'm the editor of the Nichibei Weekly in San Francisco's Japantown, where I'm sitting here now, and the president of the Nichibei Foundation, a successor to the Nichibei Times, with a 122-year legacy of community leadership through media. I am proud today to help put together this panel on Nisei draft resistors, including my father, Noboru, along with some special guests. And I'll go from down below to Cortez, where Dan Kubo is sitting at his home. Dan is the son of Nisei draft resistor Yosh Kubo. He's a retired farmer, and he was inspired by his father's activism to help launch the UIKAI Japanese American Community Senior Services, as well as Asian American Studies programs in San Jose State. He's joined by a Cortez native, Susumu Inokita, who I believe is the last surviving resistor from the Granada camp. Susumu, can you raise your hand?
Wait.
Susumu is 96 years old, and we're really, really honored to have him here. He was a good friend of my father's as well, so we're really proud to have you here with us, Susumu, to share your thoughts as a resistor from the Granada camp. And I'm especially proud to be joined to my right or left, whatever way you look at it, by my good friend, Andy Noguchi, who is the Florin JACL co-president and has done so much activism over the years in terms of support for the Muslim and South Asian community after 9/11 and beyond, leading pilgrimages to the Manzanar concentration camp, along with the Council on American Islamic Relations. And I worked with them closely in college on a few issues, including the racial firebombing coalition, where we sought justice in the case of 5 racially motivated fire bombings in Sacramento in 1993. But next, we are going to go with a presentation by Dan Kubo, the son of Nisei draft resistor Yosh Kubo.
Hello, I'm Dan Kubo, and I am sitting here with Susumu Inokita in the community, the Nikkei farm community of Cortez. And we are on the land that was once occupied widely here in the San Joaquin Valley by the Yokuts people. And they, for millennia, had lives here. They have not disappeared. They are still here in various places in rancherias, and perhaps you've heard of Chukchansi or Tachi Palace. Those are tribal, Yokuts tribal casinos. My dad, Yosh Kubo, lived virtually all of his life in Cortez here, and was brought first to Merced Assembly Center. Then Amache became a resistor and a Tucsonian. And so this is a picture of Dad. He is in the back row, standing over on the left-hand side, and he was a captain in the Amache Fire Department. So you see him here with his crew, and those are some of his badges that he had as a firefighter. Over on the left is just a document, and I know that I'm just going to flash some of this stuff and just talk briefly about it, but that is the actual document that was the order to report for pre-induction physical that he was handed in May 2nd, 1944. Then did not appear for it, refused to appear for it, and was arrested on May 12th, 1944, and then taken to prison, taken to jail in the Pueblo County Jail, and then to Denver County Jail. Denver County Jail, he did spend quite a bit of time there. He was taken there in the middle of May, and his on the right-hand side, you'll see the document that was the actual indictment, on charges. And thanks to Kenji, he got this this document for us. That indictment happened on October 30th, 1944. So quite a bit of time elapsed from the time he was jailed for the offense of failure to appear for the pre-induction physical. And I think that my dad's court experience was slightly different from others. His attorney was Samuel Menon, who was the attorney for the rest of the Tucsonians, most of the rest of the Tucsonians, and I believe also the Heart Mountain group. But what happened is that, of course, before they actually got to the trial, they were the plea was not guilty. But when he stepped into the courtroom, the immediate thing that happened was that Samuel Menon made a motion to quash, what basically said that please throw this out because of the reasons of being under duress, because he was already in prison without due process. And so he was asking the court to throw this out. And that motion, of course, was immediately denied. And this was Judge Foster Sims, who I think was the on the bench for almost all of the Tucsonian resistors. I guess they asked for a jury. And so, which is a little bit different from the others also, because most of them were just in front of the bench. The jury was selected, but not sworn in, because what happened next was that my father pleaded nolo contendere, which meant that no contest to the charges. Yeah, I've done this, and so he was given the opportunity to speak and address the court and speak about why he did this. And I have a lot of documents that my dad kept. He didn't throw anything away, and so I have things like the writing that he did for the purpose of why did you do this. And so he had the opportunity to address the court and give his reason for resisting the draft. And I remember that my aunt, one of his younger sisters, was attended that trial, and what she remembers of it, and she was younger, I believe she was probably 17, 18, and she said that he started to pace back and forth as he was speaking to and addressing the court, and the judge admonished him for doing that. Kind of just told him, stand still, you're moving around too much. His statement basically said that, well, you've got my family behind bars. They didn't go on trial. They didn't, there was no due process. I'll gladly go into the military if you give us our rights back. And of course, that wasn't about to happen. The judge was somewhat lenient. My dad's sentence at that point was 6 months. Yeah, he was given a 6-month sentence, and thereafter sent to the prison camp above Tucson and put on the road crew there. And so that's the basic story. And over the years, my dad was not one to come out in newspaper articles or stand in front of groups of people to talk about this. But what he did do was speak to us, his family, his children. And so I recall a time, and if I can get the next slide up, this is a statement that I wrote out when I became an employee of JACL, of all things. There's a little business card up in the upper right hand, and we were part of the community involvement program of JACL, and it was I submitted this to Warren Furutani, who was our lead in this program. I gave a whole statement of who I was as a Japanese American. I talked about the fact that my father did talk about camp. You know, we knew about this, and as we grew older, he talked more and more about more of the details, the dirty details. And so the one part on this page that I would like to relate is he related to me that he had gone to prison during the war because he refused to serve in the army. His reason is that, as he put it, the army is supposed to serve the people of the U.S., but my people were in prison, and the hell with the army. And so that was kind of his, the way he put it to us, you know, and I could tell that it was with bitterness that he said this. The result of him having given us this kind of information, you know, I was at the point where I was in college. I went to San Jose State, and during that point, you know, I went to San Jose State in 1968, and soon thereafter, San Francisco State had the teacher strike. There was much going on. Anti-Vietnam War events were happening, and so I became caught up in it. I you know, saw the injustices that were around. There was a lot of talk about racism. So, you know, I got into trying to get Asian American Studies instituted at San Jose State. And we were successful in doing that. And then I was also involved eventually in the Asians for Community Action. And we worked on various programs in the community. But the one thing that it did lead to was the formation of UICAI, the Japanese American Community Senior Service, dealing with, at that point, Issei, that needed to have social services and various, you know, there were various needs that we assessed amongst the population. And you know, we're very proud to say that it exists and is a very a great organization that really is, you know, testament to the community's collaborative effort. And that's the thing that we saw in this. And I don't, you know, my wife Chris and I are sometimes said, you know, the way it's put is that we are the founders, but you know, we only just got things rolling a little bit. You know, we never imagined that it would come to this point. But the collaboration that the community in San Jose, the Nikkei community in San Jose showed, the churches, JACL, the Merchants Association, all of these different organizations came together and saw that need and worked towards that. And I think that's the whole point. That's the activism that really, you know, I was given license for that kind of activism by my father. And I know that there were other people that weren't so fortunate in their family situations to have that kind of support. And I felt that support strongly from my father. And so that's what led to that kind of activism. And I think that that's what I would like to see carried. You know, that's what we feel is important, is to carry that kind of activism, to show support. And I really would like to say that the younger people in the community, in the Nikkei community, and that have the concerns about things like resistors and all of these various things, the alutes, you know, there are so many different, you know, things that you could look to as the result of something that has happened in this United States society. Racism being really probably right at the top. You know, the way to work towards alleviating or getting rid of it is to work together. Number one, see the common causes and common conditions of people, no matter who they are, and work towards doing something about that. And I think that that's an important lesson that I have learned over the years. Here are some books that I have kind of pulled out of my library that and Kenji talked about several of these books. And so this is my effort at doing a bibliography of the Tucsonians. And not each of the books talks specifically about the Tucsonians, but they're very much related to the whole reasons why they did this and what happened. And I want to advocate for reading books. And I guess maybe this is the educator in me, but I think that I saw someplace one of the things that was said is that in order to combat fascism, one must read. And I thought about that and I said, yes, read widely about what is happening in your society with your people. But you want to start with those who are closest to you. And check it out. See what is happening, what has happened. It's important. History is an important thing. To see what has happened and how relevant it is today. And so I'm kind of standing on my soapbox here, but I guess this is the opportunity to do that. And I really thank Kimiko and the whole Tadaima crew for giving this opportunity and for showing so many different issues in our community, so many different things that are going on that are important for us. I think about my grandkids, and they need to see these things. And I must say that our children, Chris and I have 5 children, and they have also paid attention to things that Grandpa went through, Grandma went through. And I'm really happy that they are, I think their lives have been enriched by knowing this history. And we want to encourage that. So thank you very much.
This is the story of Noboru Taguma's journey of resistance. In April 1942, Noboru Taguma, the eldest of 7 kids, was uprooted along with his family from Broderick, California, right across the river from Sacramento, the capital of California. They were living in a poor farming community of about 25 Japanese American families farming for the Todd Hunter Ranch. They were first sent to the Merced Assembly Center, a converted fairgrounds, where they lived for 4 months. And in late summer of 1942, they were relocated to the Granada or Amache concentration camp in southeastern Colorado. There, Noboru received his 4C enemy alien classification from the government. In February 1943, all the Nisei were faced with the so-called loyalty questionnaire, asking them if they would go to the army. Question 27 and 28 was, would they pledge allegiance to the United States and forswear any allegiance to the emperor? He answered no to question 27 and yes to question 28. He intentionally failed to report to the Army's physical examination and pre-deduction physical, which led to his arrest. There he was sent to the federal penitentiary near Denver and Denver County Jail, awaiting trial for 4 months. He stated out his reasons for resistance in a letter. Part of it, the reasoning was a denial of civil rights as prescribed in the Constitution, the fact that his family was relocated without due process of law, the fact that they were going to be serving in a segregated unit, his 4C classification when entering the relocation center. He stated, I felt that refusal to cooperate with selective service was the most effective protest I could make against the injustices suffered, that a government which has deprived me of freedom and civil rights has no legal right to conscript me for military service. Had I not been deprived of these constitutional rights, I would have gladly accepted for military service. For what cause would I be fighting for? A home surrounded by barbed wire fence? While in jail, the JACL representatives visited them in jail, and they were all happy. to, initially they thought that they would help them get out. On March 30, 1944, Minoru Yasui, Joe Grant Masaoka, and Suzuhara visited the resistors at the Department of Justice Federal Correctional Institution at Inglewood. Their purpose was to persuade the boys, if possible, to change their ideas and agree to comply with the draft. And that is a picture of the facility. They, one by one, they came into the room, and they tried to, dissuade them from resisting. In their report, they said 3 were decidedly tough guys. Their exhibition of bravado or refusal to talk English or sullenness were distinct proof of their alien loyalty. They are too far gone for salvation and are incorrigible, even if avenues for redemption were open. One 18-year-old was a pitiable case. It may be that center rumors of the Japanese-American troops being used as cannon fodder and suicide spearheads had touched his imagination. When asked why he refused to report for pre-induction physical examination, he answered, "My life." And this is my father talking. So it was my turn, and then I greet these people. Then Min Yasui say, "Well, Noboru, the first thing I want you to do is go in the army." Then I got really mad. I told them, if I was going to go to the army, I wouldn't be here, I told them loud. I said I wouldn't be here in the first place. I'm fighting for my constitutional rights. I would never go into the army unless my folks are free, my family. They said, "Your family's having a good time inside the camp, Min Yasui and Joe said. God, they pissed me off. Good time? Then I got mad. You chicken shit. I got no business with you guys, and I just walked out. They're ass-kissing the government, For acting aggressively to the JACL representatives, including Min Yasui, who previously defied the curfew orders before the forced relocation, the 3 resistors with more aggressive reactions, Noboru Taguma, Hideo Ito, and George Yamazumi, were sent to solitary confinement, presumably an attempt to punish them or break their will. They took us way up there. Oh my God, that was hot. They tortured us. We had to take all our clothing off. Too hot, steamy, like a Turkish bath or what you call that hot stuff. The next morning, Joe said, no, one more night like this, and I would have gone into the army. I couldn't take this hot stuff. However, in jail, they got a morale boost by a Nisei veteran from Hawaii who happened to visit. He was identified as a 100th Battalion officer named Oshiro or something. It's my dad saying, he said that 90% of my men was wiped out and I'm crippled. He was in rehab in Denver Hospital. But one thing I came to tell you is this. You are doing the right thing. In Hawaii, we weren't in camp, so we had to think about you guys who are in the concentration camp. You have a right to fight. To gambari nasai. Boy, that was the biggest morale booster you can find, Nisei officer, telling us we're doing the right thing. This July 1, 1944 Denver Post article mentions the conviction of Noboru Taguma as well as others from the Granada camp. They were represented by defense attorney Samuel Menon, who also represented the Heart Mountain Resistors. They were sentenced to the federal prison camp near Tucson, Arizona, the same camp that civil rights icon Gordon Hirabayashi, who defied curfew and relocation orders, would be sentenced to. After serving 9 months and getting out in good behavior, Noboru Taguma relocated to Granada, the small town near the concentration camp in Colorado. He could not enter the camp because of his record. Of course, he was a felon and bad influence at the time. So he got a job at the Granada fish market in town until he got fired. And this is an example of community ostracism. He said, "I was selling fish and cashier and everything. Then I guess some people didn't like a draft resistor working in there or something. I didn't know until later when my friend said, 'You got fired because they got a complaint. Resistor was working over there.'" And this is what I call reverse Hogan's Heroes, like the famous TV show from the 60s or so that had American POWs sneaking out of a German concentration camp. Every night for a month, Noboru would walk or hitchhike the 2 miles or so to the camp, sneak under the barbed wire fence, time the searchlights, and dash along the cesspool to enter the camp to visit his family, who were residing in 7E to 12E. He would eat some musubi or watch movie in the mess hall, and when he was told the MPs were around, he would sneak back out the same way he would come in, at the full risk of being shot, sneaking out by the cesspool and timing the searchlights. His family was important to him, and as eldest son or chonan, he felt a certain responsibility. He reflected upon this years later. Gee, if I think of it now, how the hell I had that kind of courage to go inside? Guard is over there. But at the time, when you're young, you don't think about it. You think about your family first. I was worried about my father and, my mother. To get a sense of the proximity, you have the town of Granada on the upper right corner, and then you have the Granada or Amache concentration camp on the lower left corner. So roughly 2 miles, 3 miles. To try to get his family closer to home in Tule Lake in California, he decided to renounce his citizenship. But the plan backfired. Upon visiting his friend Joe Norikane in Denver, a fellow draft resistor, he was picked up by the FBI at Joe's apartment. As he recalled, Joe, as soon as he opened the door, Joe started singing in Japanese, "Warui toki ni kaita na, warui toki ni kaita na," which means you came back at a bad time. And my father was puzzled. He's saying, "Joe, what kind of song is that? That's a strange song." And then he opened the door to reveal two well-dressed FBI agents sitting there waiting to pick him up for renouncing his citizenship. He was sentenced to the Federal Justice Department camp at Santa Fe, and then when that closed, he was relocated to the family reunification camp in Crystal City, Texas, ironically without his family. Then he was released he was sent on probation to the Seabrook Farms in New Jersey to work in the cannery. He was released finally from his parole on September 20th, 1947, almost 2 years after everyone else was released. He was released so late that he missed the first reunion of the Tucsonians, the mostly Granada resistors who were sentenced to the federal labor camp in Tucson. This was their first reunion in 1947. This was their 20th anniversary reunion in 1965 in Sacramento. My father is on the first row, second from the left, next to Hiroshi Yamauchi. In the 1990s, there was a movement for the reclamation of this history, and a bunch of articles and events that would shape the future. I had stumbled into a Asian American Studies class with Wayne Maeda in 1991, and as he would say, his eyes lit up because I told him that my father was one of these resistors. Wayne had known that there were some in the area but didn't know of any, and he was putting together an exhibit on landmark exhibit on the Japanese American experience at the 50th anniversary of Executive Order 9066. So my class assignment was to interview my father and put together some artifacts, which would become that portion of the exhibit. He would do an interview with the Sacramento Bee. Wayne Maeda would come over with Jeannie Wong, and that was the first of many articles in the Bee, about 6 or 7, that featured my father and his resistance. In 1993, February, I organized a draft resistance forum at the California State University Sacramento campus, which started to bring the resistor story out. It's monumental in many ways. It essentially started this movement to recognize the resistors locally and then nationally. A year later, the Florida JACL recognized the local resistors with their Daruma Civil Rights Award. And then my dad said that he was overwhelmed. He said, "I guess these younger people understand more about the civil rights, unlike the older JCL people. Books started to come out with his experience in it. First was A Fence Away from Freedom by Ellen Levine in 1995, which included his oral history as well as that of other resistors from other camps, including Granada and Heart Mountain and I believe Topaz. And then in 2007, America Nikke Nisei no Chohei Kihi by Professor Yuki Morita came out. And in 2011, Prisons and Patriots by Tristan Lyon on those who resisted and were sentenced to the Tucson Federal Labor Camp, including Gordon Hirabayashi and the Amache resistors came out. In 1999, there was a dedication of the Gordon Hirabayashi Recreation Site. They were going to name it after the most famous resident of that federal labor camp, Gordon Hirabayashi, and I informed the U.S. Forestry Service that there were also about 36 Nisei draft resistors also sentenced there, so they decided to include them. And there's my father, second from the right, sandwiched between Heart Mountain resistors Tako Shizaki and Yosu Kuromiya, who also joined the ceremony, as well as Joe Norikane, Hideo Takeuchi, and Ken Yoshida, the resistors on the very left. This is a picture of my parents, Sakae Noboru Taguma, with Gordon Hirabayashi. My mother and Gordon shared roots in Nagano Prefecture. And this is the National JCL Reconciliation Ceremony, which was initiated by a movement within the JCL led by Andy Noguchi, who was at the 1993 Resistors Forum I organized at Cal State Sacramento, and who would lead the Florida JCL recognition. They passed a resolution in 2000 at their Monterey JCL convention and had the ceremony honoring the surviving resistors in 2002 at the Japanese Cultural Community Center in Northern California. Just a few comments on my father's resistance. My dad taught me that ordinary people can do extraordinary things in the face of adversity. Even a simple, unsophisticated farm boy like my father, who would farm for more than 45 years, farm tomatoes for Campbell Soup in Clarksburg. Growing up, I was ashamed of my heritage. I was constantly teased for my slanted eyes, called nip, jap, or chink all too frequently. My father's story saved me. It gave me a sense of purpose. It instilled an unbreakable sense of pride, an unshakable sense of principle. My personal relationship with my father, however, actually wasn't so great, particularly in my teens, when I saw him as an easily irritable old man. I was a fifth of 5 kids. At home, I was a lazy, unfilial son. I wouldn't be quick to do any chores and intentionally wouldn't try hard with homework. All my siblings above me were exceptional students, athletes, or both. Because of my lack of ambition, he kept on saying, pride ogonai, or you have no pride. He also kept saying, they don't know about us guys. They don't know about us resistors, like a mantra. It wouldn't be until years later that I truly understand what he meant. It was my chance enrollment at California State University, Sacramento, Asian American Studies class with Wayne Maeda, where Wayne was the first to validate his experience and taught me about the true heroism in his wartime actions. My semester-long project was for Wayne's class was to interview my father, research his history, and put together what would become a portion of the Sacramento History Museum exhibit. Through it all, our family was by his side, traveling to the former federal labor camp near Tucson together in 1999, and numerous events. It was a testament to my father that his kids truly supported him every step of the way, as he finally received the recognition for his gutsy stand some 5 decades earlier. His story continues to inspire me. My father's story gave me a voice, and I committed to give his story the voice that he had been yearning for all these years. We attended event after event together, and now he can no longer say they don't know about us guys. My father's stand of resistance, his social justice stand, inspired me to become very involved in student activism, social justice work. In a year and a half at Cal State Sacramento, I organized some 24 programs, be it a couple of Asian American film festivals, a couple of Asian Heritage Weeks, Pacific Heritage Weeks, numerous speakers on campus, large forums with thousands of people on hate crimes, on Proposition 187, anti-immigrant legislation, Proposition 209, anti-affirmative action legislation. And I published 3 editions of my own Asian American newspaper called Asia American Journal, because I felt that it was important to give voice to the Asian American issues. That that strive to the commitment to social justice still inspires me today in my work in community and giving a voice to the voiceless and bringing out marginalized stories. So to this, I owe a great debt of gratitude to my father, as well as those who helped to bring out a story, namely Wayne Maeda and Andy Noguchi. Thank you.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Susuma, how are you doing?
How are you? I'm
Good.
doing fine, thank you.
Have you finally retired at the age of 96?
I'm retired a long time ago.
Well, I know you've been busy doing a lot of work with sheep and also doing some trucking work before, but it's very good to see you and glad you can join us today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I sold all my sheep because we had to go. We were out of water this year and have to water them and also to buy the feed. So they ate themselves out of a home.
Okay. Hey, Dan, would you like to maybe start the interview with
Yeah,
Susuma
sure.
now?
Sure. So I have to say that Susumu was one of the younger guys amongst the Tucsonians. In fact, you might have been the youngest, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. He was one of the younger ones when all of this started up in Tucson. So you were telling me when was it that you actually got arrested?
I got arrested January 22, 1944.
And then where did they send you as far as prison or jail?
Well, it was already late afternoon, so we had to spend a night in little town above. We were in Pueblo. Yeah. Then from there we went into a place, I forget the name of the place over there, south of Denver. And I stayed there, I think, something like 6 months.
Oh, that was that long.
Yes.
Oh. And so the trial itself must have been after that, right?
Yeah, it took a little while before everything got set and straightened out. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that you had it took that long for you to actually get through all of that.
Yeah, it was well over 6 months before I got a trial.
Yeah. And so when they sentenced you, and you were the judge was Foster Sims as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Judge Sims.
And what was the sentence that he gave you?
He gave me 1 year of sentence. It's called misdemeanor. 1 year, 1 day is federal prison. You have to report for identification to the marshal's office every 2 weeks.
In other words, parole.
That's right.
Yeah, after you get out. So why did you do this? I know we've talked about that a little bit, but why did you resist the draft? You know, say you're gonna. I mean, you knew what was going to happen, right?
Yes, I didn't know what to extent prison life going to be. When they picked me up, I said, why go to the army? Why go serve for the United States? Why do I have to give up my life to appease the United States people? So I said, the heck with that noise. I'm not going.
Yeah, much like everyone else, I guess. And so I imagine when you were in the prison camp, they put you on the road gang there. Huh?
Yes. Each of us had a designated employment at the prison camp. Mine was, I was with Noboru Taguma and rest of the farm crew. We had about a dozen people run the farm to feed the rest of the inmates in the federal prison camp there.
And so your release was let's see, I'm trying to figure out when it was that you were actually released from the prison. Had to still been late in 1944.
Let's see. I haven't got any money. The dates in my mind.
But if you were picked up in January and you spent about 6 months in jail before your
yes, I was. What's the name? Oh, I was sent to Inglewood Correctional Institute, south of Denver.
Oh,
After being picked up, and I was there 4 months before they decided to put us in the Klamath jail, 1444 Klamath Street in Denver, Colorado.
it's pretty good. He still remembers the address of the jail.
But the jail is not there anymore. When we had the reunion in Denver,
Oh yeah.
I went looking for that place so I could take some pictures, but no, they had demolished that building over there.
Yeah, I remember that, being with you and you saying, "Hey, it's not there anymore." Yeah. So after you got out of prison, what happened? Where did you go?
Well, after I got out of prison, let's see.
You ended up back in Denver?
Yeah, let me get this thing straight. Kazuo Kunitake and I had 1 year sentence, and the rest of the people had how do you call it? The terminology don't come out of my mind. Anyhow, they had we were 1 year. They were 1 year, 1 day. Oh, that's a federal offense. We were under 1 year is a misdemeanor offense. So we spent that year, about 9 months. We were out of there, and I came back to California. No, to Denver, and went to camp. They wouldn't let us into camp, so we had to stay outside in Granada. And Noboru Taguma says, "Let's go into camp tonight." So we went into camp and visited the family, and by morning we'd be out of there again. And each night we did that for quite a while until they found out we were doing it. And they chased us all over camp, running full speed as fast as you can run in the dark. You fall down and you pick yourself up and run again, and then get your directions straight.
So then you ended up elsewhere though, right? In Denver or something that you were talking about?
Yeah. My brother and I somehow got together, and there was a farmer. We were working over there in Granada, and I forgot his Japanese name, but I owe him my life, because we were broke. We didn't have any money, and he gave us, I think there was about 4 of us, each of us $100 a piece to find a road ride into Denver. And we rode the camp supply truck at that time, and then got into Denver and found a place to stay. And each time we go someplace to eat, we try to find a good place to stay. So as we were doing that, Joe Norikane found us at this one restaurant, and we became good friends from then on. And he's my lifetime friend until he died a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We found employment over there in Denver from Hartner Produce Company, and we worked there at least 8 months, walking 29 blocks every day, every night. And each time we'd come home, we'd expect to have something on the table to eat, but some of the friends we had just didn't supply us with their knowledge of cooking. So we had to go eat at the Sarashina restaurant 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, well, they probably wouldn't have cooked anything good anyway.
But the sugar was a key.
Oh.
Sugar was rationed.
Right.
And well, where did it go? They had girlfriends on the side. That's where the sugar went.
Oh. See, the stories come out. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'd just like to say, Dan and Susumu, that I really appreciate everything you've done over the years, Susumu, to tell your stories and to let people know why you protested. It's really been inspiring to me and many other people that you stood up for your rights and your family's rights and our whole community. It was very difficult to do that. So thank you very much.
Without further ado, I think next we're going to show a short clip from the Conscious in the Constitution featurette on the Resistors Reconciliation Ceremony in 2002. And then we're going to talk to Andy about that, because he's been hanging out so patiently.
I'd like to welcome you to today's Nisei Resistors of Conscience Recognition and Reconciliation Ceremony. Today is a history-making day. After almost 60 years, the National JACL is formally recognizing and seeking to reconcile with the Nisei Resistors of Conscience.
I think it's something that we had to do. The resolution that was passed in Monterey said we have to have this ceremony, and Floyd Moore and I talked about it and said rather than do this in some remote area in Arkansas, where it's not going to have any significance, it has to be something that has meaning.
Living so close, if we didn't show up, well, we figure, we're, after what you guys went through, we decide to, come out.
This is about understanding something about the resistors and to reconcile what we as an organization, what the JACL did, the position it took, and to restate that in a very different way through the apology.
It's a real tragedy that we should be regarding each other as the enemy. I think the resistors, because we have been so prominent, might be the logical stepping stone to where the JACL could come around to approaching the whole Japanese American community in their role as government cronies during that critical period in our life. Because I think that that's where the real trauma lies.
So the focus of JACL during this stage of our past was patriotism. Today's ceremony is a clear recognition that JACL neglected to support the resistors of conscience in their protest against injustice. JACL offers a sincere apology for the painful experiences and memories caused by that neglect.
I'm overwhelmed. I wish to extend my appreciation to the JACL for sponsoring this ceremony. This ceremony is especially meaningful to me as I was one of the organizers of the Heart Mountain Fair Play Committee, and which legally challenged the constitutionality of drafting inmates from the concentration camps, and thus raised the ire of the wartime JACL leaders and bore the brunt of their vicious attacks. I think it would be entirely appropriate for JACL to go one step further and hold a similar program directed towards the Japanese American community for the excesses committed by wartime JACL leaders, such as acting as informants for the government, causing many innocent people to suffer. I believe such action would finally put to rest JACL's unholy ghosts of the past and would be a worthy way to start the 21st century. The United States government apologized for their wartime excesses. Can JACL do less? Thank you.
Hi, and I'm back, and I'm really proud to be here with Andy Noguchi, who is the co-president of the JACL Foreign Chapter, and many civil rights activities, including bringing pilgrims to the Manzanar pilgrimage with the Council of American Islamic Relations. Did a lot of work in regards to the Sacramento firebombing trial coalition, seeking justice in 5 racially motivated firebombings. And building bridges after 9/11 with the Muslim and Arab communities. It's been consistent throughout the years and is really my role model in terms of activism. And I'm so honored and privileged to have been under his tutelage as a student when he made me speak at public rallies. And really one of my dearest friendships and role models. So Andy, we're going to get started here. We have some questions for you.
First, before that, Kenji, I'd just like to maybe comment on the film and the ceremony and maybe share some initial things with people. Excuse me. It was an amazing ceremony, as everyone who's seen from that short clip from Frank Abe's film. There were 19 surviving resistors at the ceremony, representatives of 5 other families, 350 people from all across the country, family members, community members, leaders. There was national, international, ethnic community coverage of that issue. And it was just amazing, that kind of interest and support. And this represented a huge sea change from seeing the Nisei resistors as someone to be ostracized and people who are disloyal, to a broader understanding, respect, and urge for reconciliation, with those resistors and their families. But I'd like to, thank you and Dan and Susumu for inviting me to participate in this panel here. Also for Kimiko Mar for getting the Tadaima pilgrimages organized. It's a tremendous service to the Japanese American, the entire community, and the public and everything. So thank you for that. If I can, I'd like to talk about three areas that I think are probably I have a lot of experience and exposure to.
Okay.
My wife, Twyla Tamita, and I have been involved with support efforts for about 9 of the 10 years that the resistors movement ran, from about 1992 to 2002 at the ceremony. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what led up to the 2002 ceremony. How did it come about?
Mhm.
Also, why was this effort over the 10 years successful in helping to make this kind of progress and to help build these types of bridges and understanding? And then, maybe later on, if it fits in, Kenji, what's the importance of the Nisei resistors for today? So I guess just sharing some things about the recognition and reconciliation movement. This was a huge 10-year grassroots effort by many diverse people who helped to bring this together. And it's just, amazing how that all did come together and lead to this type of progress. So I'm just going to briefly recap some of the things from the JACL or community perspective as far as the resistors reconciliation recognition campaign over these years. Going back to 1992, when the Sacramento History Museum had the Japanese American exhibit, that's the first exposure that I think we had locally with this issue. To the 1993 forum that you organized with Wayne Maeda at Sac State. And I recall that day in 1993, there was a heavy rainstorm, throughout Sacramento. And my wife, Twyla, and I hiked about a quarter mile through parking lots to get over to the forum. We're soaked like rats and everything, but it was well worth the hike and the effort. Just hearing like firsthand from many of the resistors that have been outspoken over the years, including your dad, about what really went on, and it really opened up my eyes to this basically covered up history of resistance and struggle and protest from the camps. And as someone who used to teach Asian American Studies in the 1970s, I was kind of shocked, why hadn't we heard about this before? It's so important. It's such a lesson in everything for us today. But, thank you for organizing that program. And that led to the 1994 program where the Florida JACL recognized the resistors of conscience, along with Gordon Hirabayashi, who was also a draft resistor at that time. And then in 1995, the Pacific Southwest District of the JACL did a first major resolution supporting the resistors and recognizing, even though it didn't include a specific apology in that resolution. Then in 1998 to 1999, people in the Pacific Northern California JACL district organized an effort to have the district support the resistors, and also called on the national JACL at that time to also recognize the resistors and to have some sort of public ceremony. So fortunately, that did pass. That passed by about an 18-2 vote of the chapters in Northern California, including Honolulu, that played a major role in that. And then that resolution then went to the national board, which supported it, but on the condition that each one of the 8 JACL districts in the country also support that resolution. Unfortunately, that didn't pass unanimously as required. There were 5 districts in support, 2 opposed, and 1 abstained. But that led to the 2000 convention, where we were able to garner support from 2/3 of the JACL chapters across the United States. And then that all led up to the 2002 ceremony that people have seen. But, a lot of people ask, why did this campaign succeed? And, I'm thinking back 20, 30 years now and reviewing information. And I think I've kind of pinpointed a number of reasons why this campaign succeeded. And I think it might be also valuable for future issues that Japanese Americans in the JACL take on. First and foremost, I think it was the principles of the resistors themselves, and being willing to share that kind of protest and their reasoning, their experiences with people across the country. That was key. I think another reason this effort passed was that we tried to take a respect and reconciliation approach to it, rather than being divisive, blaming people for things that were done 50, 60 years ago. We wanted it to be a healing effort that would lead to more unity in the community and more strengthening in our ability to take on future challenges. I think also clearly defining the issue. Unfortunately, at their time, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Tule Lake No-No resistors, a very important, very valuable group. And we had to limit it to the Nisei draft resistors, just so that people could understand more clearly what some of the issues were around loyalty. And fourthly, broad and continuous grassroots education. I know we surveyed our members about their issues and questions and tried to answer those questions that people had about this proposed resolution. And then fifthly, very broad community education done, especially by journalists like J.K. Yamamoto, Martha Nakagawa, yourself, Kenji, on getting the word out about the story. Authors like Eric Muller, filmmakers like Frank Abe, Emiko Omori, and her sister, to bring this out to the broad community. That plus, other leaders like different veterans organizations like the MIS in Northern California, the 442nd Club of Hawaii, the Japanese American Veterans Association, leaders like Senator Inoue, who really was an amazing leader for recognition and reconciliation, and speaking from his heart to many Japanese Americans why this was important. I think another thing that played an important role in getting this passed is that there was what happened in 2001. 2001 was the 9/11 attack, and it brought to the forefront questions about, are Muslim Americans to be trusted? What's their loyalty? Are people going to speak up and defend Muslims, Arabs, Sikhs, South Asian Americans, or not? And I think that brought to the forefront the importance of this issue for today and the future challenges we face. I'd also like to acknowledge the leadership of people like Floyd Morey, the president of the National JACL, John Tateishi, the executive director, and members of the national board. They were very open-minded about this issue and learning and wanting to bring it forward, because I think they recognize that the leadership of the JACL dealing with future challenges depending on what JACL did then about protesters, from within the camps themselves, the Nisei resistors. They recognized that was important to strengthen the organization for those challenges. So I congratulate them on doing that and taking that approach. I remember having dinner with Floyd Morty and Alan Taruya to talk about, what we intended, what was our purpose in having the ceremony, and I was impressed, with what he saw for the future of the JACL. And finally, I say a big thumbs up to a lot of the JACL activists from the Northwest, Southwest, LA, Southern California, Honolulu, throughout Northern California. They stuck with it through those 10 years and put in a lot of effort to make sure things did happen. So those are just, some of the 8 things I've kind of pinpointed here recently about why was this successful. Okay, so sorry for taking up so much time, Kenji.
No, Andy, and then just one question, and I'll go back to another question that came through. There was a lot of concern initially about the impact on JACL's membership, whether people would leave en masse because of this resolution. Could you give some insight into that, both on the national level and locally in Florida?
Okay. Well, it did have an impact on membership and support for the JACL. I know that there were a number of very good veteran leaders who had a difficult time accepting this, and a number of them did quit the JACL, the Florida chapter, other chapters around the country. That did happen. At the same time, there are a lot of people we met through this issue who respected the JACL for taking this kind of leadership. So people joined the JACL because of this kind of a civil rights stance and what it was trying to do to reconcile people in the community. Some people, point to the general decline of the JACL membership in the 2000s, but you have to look at that time was a period when many of the Nisei generations were pulling back from being active. They're getting up into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so it was kind of that time period when there was a lot of changes in JACL membership.
Mm-hmm. Great. And the one final question for you before we open it up to the audience. Why, you've been involved consistently with civil rights issues over the last decades. Why are the Nisei resistors important for today?
I think they're an amazing group. When I first heard about the resistors, like your father, Yoshikubo, all the other guys, and I had a chance to meet a number of them during the course of this campaign. They're really role models for standing up for what's right, standing up for principles, even when it's tough to do so. In a time of crisis in our country and our community, they had the courage to stand up and speak up. And I tell people, if the same situation were facing me today, I don't know what I'd do. It was a very tough thing to do. I really respect, the positions that many of the people took into camps. My father was an MIS veteran of the Aleutian Islands campaign, who was in the MIS service. And I know that while his family was locked up in Tule Lake, he was out there fighting for this country. So I really respect what he and other veterans did to fight against Japanese fascism at the time. and trying to make things better for our country.
Mhm. Thank you, Andy. And if we could bring Dan and Susumu, wow, it's almost like magic. We have, I'll snap my fingers next time. We have some questions from the audience. We have a question from David Moria. Has there been any mention of any resistors regretting their decisions? Susumu, have you known of any resistors who regretted their decision to resist?
Could you explain that a little further?
I mean, is there anyone that you know of that said regretted that they resisted?
No. Each one was proud of what they did. Yeah. Time. Let's see. What was it? Time heals all wounds. That was a wound that took me all my life to even understand myself. But I'm here today, and I'm proud that I did what I did. And that's all I have to say.
You know,
Can I follow up with that, Susumu? I know that you resisted along as Minoru, your brother, and another brother too, right?
Yes.
What kind of impact?
Yes.
What kind of impact did that have on your parents and your family? It must have been very tough.
Well, I lost my father January 10th, 1942. My brother had a hard time getting permission for even a funeral for my dad. And it was very difficult for him because the Western Command won't allow him to have a funeral. But he persuaded the leaders of Turlock, city of Turlock, that he was a citizen of the United States, and he wanted his father to be buried in the United States. So through all that trouble, we were on the curfew. We were on the limitation of how many guests we could have as a to say goodbye to my dad. Well, they approved all that, and through that, I'm also thankful that it was happening then. But that didn't. That's not the reason why I defected, or what do you call it, rejected the idea of serving in the United States Army. I thought that we had lost everything as far as rights goes, and I figured I'd just not die for the United States.
Great. We have another question. Is it possible to see exhibits on the resistors? And are there museums where it is possible to see them? Anybody have a answer to that? If not, I will chime in.
Will you repeat that question? My hearing is very good.
Someone asked, Museum for Peace asked if it's possible to see exhibits on the resistors, and are there museums where it is possible to see them?
Museum about you guys. I don't.
What's that?
Are there any museums that show about you guys? I don't know of any.
No, though. No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Hirabayashi Center. I mean, you know, the interpretive material there.
Okay.
You know.
I will give answers and give some props to Sacramento. The California Museum in Sacramento on N&O, I think, has, I guess it's the only mainstream museum that has a permanent exhibit on Japanese Americans. Yeah. And they do have my father's photo and a little caption on resistors there. But
Oh, yeah.
besides that, I'm not sure if there are any other museums. I think as the movement to create the Amache National Historic Site moves along, it's my hope that the story of the resistors are included there in Colorado, because it should be. It's an American story. Lastly, I would suggest resistors.com or resistors.com. It's a site that accompanies Frank Abbe's film Conscience in the Constitution, which is an excellent resource that Frank has built up over the last 20 years regarding the Nisei draft resistors. You'll see articles from myself, Martha Nakagawa, who was writing for the Pacific Citizen. You'll see videos, and he constantly updates it. So resistors.com, I think, is a great place to go for research. It also is the only known place that has a copy of the Lim Report, which is a report that the JACL commissioned in the 1990s to investigate its past. And so there's some information on resistors done by the JACL researcher. Lastly, on the day my father passed away, in order to pay tribute to him and make sure that our family remembers his resistance, I created a site at taguma.org, taguma.org. Never meant to be a public site, but a friend at the Sacramento Bee, Marcus Berton, helped me secure some of the articles over the years that the Bee ran on the resistors. And there's a lot of these articles and books and information. Andy Noguchi's eulogy of my father is on there as well. A nice piece, remembrance by Tristan Lyon. So it was never meant to be a public thing, but if you want to learn more about the Amache resistors, there's that information there. Andy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just thought of another excellent resource, the Densho website, DENSHO, has a very good collection of interviews with resistors and former incarcerees from many different backgrounds, articles, and summaries. So I'd also recommend people check out the Densho website.
Right. And also, and that makes me pops into my head another a resource, the Suyama Project at UCLA's Asian American Studies Center, which was endowed by a person supportive of resistors. So that Suyama Project, which Martha Nakagawa was involved with, helped to collect a lot of materials regarding resistance in all kinds of forms. I think Dan has some stuff that was donated over there as well. But Suyama Project at the UCLA Asian American Studies Center would be a good place to start as well.
So one thing I'd like to say about the Suyama Project, that I currently have a video, it's about 11 hours long, of, Seuss and, oh gosh, your dad. I think you were even there, present here at this house. And we had 4 resistors, and they talked the whole day. We had 2 meals. And so that video is currently at UCLA in their tech department at Asian American Studies, and they're trying to digitize it. And so I would probably like to give the Suyama Project that, make that available to them. Suyama Project.
Great. Yeah, and then in 1998, I received a fellowship from the Civil Liberties Public Education Fund, the National Education Fund of Redress, to do an oral history of the resistors. So I have 8 oral histories with resistors from Tule Lake, Topaz, Amache, and Heart Mountain, including Frank Emmy, the Fair Play Committee leader. And so someday those will get digitized and transcribed, but they're on cassette somewhere now. Finally, as we wrap up this program, I wonder if anybody has any other thoughts that they like to share regarding resistance. Anyone have questions from the audience? You're more than welcome to ask.
Well, as we're waiting there, Kenji, I'd also like to share that, there is a much larger group of incarcerees, the so-called Tule no resistors, who opposed the loyalty oath imposed on them by the U.S. government while they're still locked up. Mm-hmm. And 12,000 Japanese Americans were segregated in Tule Lake, and many of them also explicitly protested their treatment and called for an end to that kind of oppressive actions by the government. So I think that the Nisei Resistors of Conscience, those efforts in talking about loyalty and protest, it helped lay the foundation for that issue to be understood more clearly. And the National JACL in 2019 issued a recognition and apology statement to the Tule Lake no resistors, 12,000 members who were similarly mistreated by the government and ostracized.
Andy, just following up on that, is there some kind of ceremony planned for that as well?
There wasn't a ceremony worked into the actual resolution, but it's supposed to be encouraged for chapters to take it up, also to be included in the JACL curriculum guide that's used by many educators across the country. So that's another great resource, the JACL curriculum guide that could be secured through National JACL that talks about the draft resistors and the Tule Lake protesters.
Great. Dan, you have any other final thoughts on where you would like to see, your children, your grandchildren, engage, how you want them to engage with this story of your father?
Continue to resist. And I see signs out there. I see various efforts by younger people. I want to point out, Tsudo for Solidarity is a program of resistance. It is intergenerational. So in that respect, it is even better to have an intergenerational, at least a chance for dialogue and interaction. I see something like the Young Buddhist Editorial up in Seattle that is doing some great work. Younger people in the arts, field of the arts and music that are bringing our community issues out in their work. I want to point out No Boy Project. I think some of their work is just tremendous. And so my advice would be to pay attention to these things because there's a lot to be gained. At least plant seeds of like, whoa, what is this about? What did happen to our people? Those kinds of things. Each person has to answer those questions for themselves. I think that's one thing I've learned is that you have to answer questions for yourself. What does it mean to me? And is it significant enough for me to take action?
And finally, the last word goes to the eldest. Kumu, Kida.
They're giving you
a true American hero, age 96, probably the last surviving Tucsonian, the Granada resistor, and one of the very last altogether. What lesson do you want younger people to take away from your experience of resistance going into succeeding generations?
It's very difficult to explain. Like I said before, time heals all wounds. I think tonight it has helped me understand what I did do myself. At one time, I think it was after we came back from the camps, and we were farming, and I had to appear for another induction into the army. I told them then that I had already served my time in the prison, and they let me go. They didn't ask me to serve at that time, and that kind of served a purpose in my life that I was right in what I had done, and today I'm kind of not worried as to what's going to happen tomorrow. But tomorrow is always there. And my life I don't know how much longer I got left, but I'm proud to be one of the resistors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susumu.
So much, Susumu. You can't hear it, but everyone's giving you a standing ovation now. Virtually. I can't hear it either, but I really want to thank you for your courage decades ago, for your friendship with my father and being there with him during this incredible movement of the 90s, where you're finally recognized for your courage so many years after the fact. You really are, one of my heroes. As are all the resistors, and thanks, Dan, for sharing your father's story. Hope you can continue to work the circuit with me and make sure other kids of resistors get more engaged with their ancestor story. I think you've done a great job with your kids, who are probably all listening right now. So thank you, Dan. And Andy, I can't say enough how much our family appreciates your work through the years, and for spearheading the Florin JCL recognition, for spearheading the national JCL recognition. It started with Wayne Maida kicking my butt to get more engaged in my story, but I think you took it to a whole nother level, and we can never thank you enough. So really appreciate it, Andy, and glad you're here with us today.
Kenji, can I add something?
Sure. You're 96. You can add whatever you want.
Just a minute.
Okay.
This is a song that I've always carried in my life. And now the end is near, and so I face the final sentence. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled every road and every highway. And now, and much more than this, I did it my way. Good night, everybody.
Good night, and what a fitting ending. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.